This conference will now be recorded.
Hi all, welcome to the session. Please let me know once you can see my screen. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Let me open the project just a second. Oh, did you get a chance to practice correction classes? Okay, if not, please practice. Okay, so today we will start with exception handling, and then we will look into what is the concept of exception handling and how to handle the exceptions in code. What are the different ways? Okay.
Okay.
It's taking some time here. Don't know why. Let's wait for a second. Yeah, it got open. Okay, collections is there. Good. Okay. Now let me create a new class. Click on the add button, new item, and then go to code, create a runnable class. Let me call this runnable class as ICI exception handling. Okay. Click on the add button. Okay. Now you can see here. First thing, what is exception handling? What is exception handling? For example, let's say I am writing int I equal to 10. Is there any need of doing exception handling for this or not? Do we need to write exception handling in this case or not? Hey, please speak out here. Do we need to write exception handling or not?
No,
Why?
because I'm just assigning, I'm not doing any updates.
Okay. Okay. Good. So see here, whenever you're thinking about the exception handling, the first thing that you should come into mind, that you should get in mind is whether exception handling is needed or not. Okay, because whenever we are working with the exception handling, I saw in a lot of places where exception handling is written, but there is no need of writing there is no need of having any exceptions or that there will be no exception at all in that case. Okay, so whenever you are trying to work with the exception handling, the first point that you need to remember is you need to check and you need to identify the scenario, and then you need to decide whether to write exception handling or not. Okay, this is the first point. Now, second point, how to work with the exception handling. To start with the exception handling, we have few keywords. One is try to write a block of code where we are expecting some kind of exception. Second one is catch. Catch will indicate what should be done when there is an exception in the code. And then retry. Retry is used to indicate again do a try and then come back. And the last one is throw. If you want to have a hard stop in your code and when you have an exception you don't want to continue, then you will use throw. Okay, let's see all of them in detail. First of all, I will use try, and then inside this try I will write some piece of code. Okay, for example, I have int I equal to 10, and then I will say int j equal to 0. Okay, and then I will write here int k equal to I by j. I am doing 10 by 0 here. Okay, and now coming to these errors, coming to the catch, you can write in different ways. One is you can write a specific exception. Please remember the first preference should be given to specific exception only. You can see exception is the enumerated data type. You can see all these are the different types of exceptions that we have. Okay, and here you can see break, CLR error, all these are the types of exceptions. Okay, I am taking the error first of all, and then in this again inside the catch as well, there are multiple ways the people will write the exceptions. Okay, inside the catch I can simply write the info. Let's say I have the exception but I can neglect that exception, so I will say exception can be neglected. Okay, because I'm just informing the end user, and I will continue, because if you write exception with error, then what will happen? Let me write some more statements here. I will say info outside of exception. This is the first step. Okay, outside of exception. And then inside try, here I wrote one thing, and catch, and there is one more catch. You can write in the catch, you can say any other exception. Okay, you can take exception colon colon CLR error. This is one more type of exception. So like this, you can write whatever the type of exception you get. Okay, so this is called specific exception. Here you can also use warning. There is a possibility that you can also use warning. Yeah, you can say exception caught or some CLR exception caught. But please remember, when you are trying to use info or warning, those are not the hard stop. Those are not the hard stop. So what is the hard stop? If you want to have the hard stop, you need to use throw, and then you need to use error. Okay, even if you write, let's say for example, I will say error. Inside this error I will say CLR exception here again. Okay, and if you want to print the message, okay, if you want to print the message, you can say plus AIF util colon colon. You will have a method called get CLR error message. Using this you can get the CLR exception. Okay, this is one more type. And then you can also write throw error, and then you can say throwing the error. Let's see what is the difference between error and throw error. Okay, error and throw error. Okay, now for the time being, let's execute this, and then we will see where exactly it will go. And if you expect, or if you don't know what is the type of exception you might get, then you can simply use catch, and then you can simply say throw error in the bracket. You can say contact administrator. But please remember, try to avoid throw as much as possible. Okay, because throw is a hard stop. Okay, throw is a hard stop. Okay, now let's see what is the difference between each of them. First of all, I want to execute this piece of code. I'm adding a breakpoint here, and let me set this exception handling as the startup object. and run. Good. It says we have errors in the code. Let's see what are those and then get back. What is the semicolon expected? It is saying somewhere you missed it. Okay, here. Semicolon. Done. And then I think I have the breakpoint. Let me run.
Hey Kumar, today can you just show me? Suppose I have imported some XPO. How
Hmm.
can I just dump it here?
XPO you can't dump it because here you need AXPP. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So
Because
only the way is
XPO is not going to
LCS.
work. You
Okay.
need to, if you do the upgrade, then it is through LCS. Okay. And one thing I suggest is why to go with XPO? Do you have how many number of files are there?
No, the problem is in 365 it's very slow kind of thing, and for developer it's making life very hard. If we see in the 2012, right, just press F7 and your code will get compiled. Here
Hmm.
it's like it's taking a lot of time.
Actually, the problem is with the sync. Okay. You need to disable the sync.
No, without sync also, if you do, it will take a lot of time in comparison to 2012.
Then that's depend on machine, yeah. Because my machine you can see. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Then actually
yeah,
you
the
need to
same
increase
thing.
the machine size.
Yeah, the same code which you wrote here, right? It's taking almost 2 minutes. If you write in 2012, it's taking few seconds.
That's again a different thing. Okay. Because in case of AX 2012, for generating the IL, you have a separate way. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
But whereas in Dynamics 365, whatever the code you write, it will be converted into IL,
correct.
which is why it will
So
obviously take time.
yeah, but for small program, it will like 2012 will be very fast. Like just write something and just press F7, compile it your code.
Yeah,
No need to worry about.
that's right. Because there is a difference. Because in X++ you have the P code over there, and it is not
Yeah,
converted to IL. It's directly executed. Whereas in
correct.
Dynamics 365, that's not the case. Okay. So whatever the X++ code you write, it will be converted into IL and then it will execute, which is why it will take time. Everything is executed on framework here, .NET framework.
Yeah,
Then if you can't wait even that much amount of time, then I will suggest that you need to go for some 16 or 32 core CPU. Okay.
okay.
But actually the price will be very high if you go for the Azure machines with such a high-end machine.
Mhm.
In very rare scenarios, you get that kind of machines. Okay. If you
Yeah,
have
it's
the
better.
production
I'll
machine,
develop.
it is better.
Yeah, it's better like open 2012, write some small code and then test, then come here.
But that's not always the case because you can write only these simple pieces of code. But whereas coming to the extensions, you can't do that in AX 2012. There
Yeah,
is
I
no other
agree.
way. Okay. And here as well, there is one more way with which you can do that. But that way you need to tweak. Okay. Because for this now, we have the Visual Studio extension and we need to set up the environment from ourselves. We can do that using whatever we have here, but that will be a bit difficult, which is why I will not suggest. And that's a tweak.
Okay.
Because in this case, what will happen is AOS will get restarted and all those things will happen. Okay. But whereas whatever you can do is, if you want to get that Dynamics 365 menu and if you want to write a simple piece of code now, you can simply install the extension. I used to do that, but that's only for developing. Okay. Now you can see catch error. It went into CLR error. Okay. CLR error caught. It will go into error. This is the difference. If you write the error, it will execute the next statement. You can see here. Now throw error is a hard break. Okay. Generally, whenever we are writing these warnings or error or informative messages, there is no need of return, but warning and error, if you are returning, then it will return false. Okay, please remember that. And now let me do one more thing. Instead of this error, I want to just comment out this. Okay, or let me see. I will comment out this and then I will say throw error, and that throw error I will throw it from here. Okay, and then I want to see whether these statements are executing or not. Inside info outside of exception, I want to see, okay, what does this catch does exactly. Let's see that. Let me run and let me remove this breakpoint here and then let me add it here. This is the specific exception that we are doing now. Okay, and sometimes you might receive a generic exception. In case of generic exception, if you think so, okay, but please remember, it's not the best practice to write the generic exception, because you're saying that I don't know what kind of exceptions I will get in my code. Okay, which is a really some different kind of situation, I can say. Okay, you should know, if you are writing the code, you should know what is the type of exception you might get. If you say I don't know what type of exception I will get, then they have given the generic catch. Okay, that will be written in only in one case. Okay, if you have an integration and from that integration there are some hundreds of exceptions and you don't know what can be caught. Okay, because if you have some 4 or 5 now, then you can write exceptions. Let's say you have some hundreds of exceptions that you are expecting from there, then you will simply write generic exception and you will print what is the exception. That's how we work. Okay, please remember. This actually we can't help with this slowness, because in the development environment it should restart IIS and then it should load the this Internet Explorer again, and then it should load lot of symbols. So obviously it will be a bit slow in Dynamics 365 for development. Okay.
Yeah, and while loading the symbol also, sometimes I'm facing issues like it will not get loaded. Then again, I need to stop the service of W3P and then restart. It's like irritating basically.
For that, actually there is one this one you can do. Okay, whatever you need to do is, instead of restarting iOS and everything, you need to simply create a job here and then you need to run. If you run a job, it will load all the symbols. After that, you should not stop and then you should continue your work by adding the breakpoints. It will work, because that's how I used to do. That's not only for you, that's for everyone. Okay,
Yeah,
you are not the chosen one for that.
correct.
Because sometimes what used to happen is, while explaining in the code as well, okay, I used to put the breakpoint, but the breakpoint will never get hit. Okay,
Yeah.
even if I have the symbols and everything, that will never get hit. So I used to do this. You need to run the job, then the symbols will be loaded for the show, and then you need to do a debug. Okay, now you can see, press F10, it's the info. After catch, it will come out and execute the other one. Okay, if you want to get executed in this fashion, what you need to do? In the catch, you can write in for warning. If you don't want to execute the statements after the catch, then you need to use throw error. Let's say now I have the error, but what I want to do is in the try, I am trying to interact with the web service. Okay, and that web service is giving the timeout, or let's say some other error due to some issue. So what I need to do? I need to retry. I need to retry. So what most of the people will do is they will simply write retry and then semicolon. You know what will happen? This will create an infinite loop. This will retry, and this will increase the size of the RAM up to the maximum limit, and then it will throw the error, or it will simply stop the AOS, or it will crash the system. It will crash the entire system. Okay. So what you need to do is the retry whenever you are writing, it should be conditional. Okay. You need to have a variable called retry count, and I can say by default it's 1, and you can do if in the bracket retry count is less than or equal to some 3, 5, whatever it can be, and then you can say retry count plus plus and then retry. Okay, so it will retry until the count is 5. After that, it will say exception can be neglected. Okay, if you want to see the retry count, I can write warning in the bracket strfmt in the bracket retrying percentile 1 time comma retry count. Done. This is how we need to do. Okay, now what it will do is it will retry for 5 times and then it will throw the information exception can be neglected. Let's see this whether it works or not. Start. Okay, let's see this. And then okay, now you can see it says retry. 1 second, it's still loading. Okay, let me click on continue. You can see now the difference. Retrying third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, second time. Okay. Oh, after doing plus plus I have given, which is why it has given second time. Okay. So this is how it works. So this is how you need to work with the exception handling. Okay. And please remember, whenever you are doing a update or delete, the exception handling and the transaction tracking system is mandatory. Okay. Please remember. Now this is about the exception handling and how you are going to work. You can practice the remaining things. Okay. These are all the details which we need. Now the next step is, we know about a constants. Okay. But how to use constants in Dynamics 365? To use the constants, there are multiple ways. Okay. From that, the first thing that will come into our mind is macros. Okay. Let's see how to work with the macros and whether they are useful or performant or not, and all those things. Okay. Let's see that. Now, what do you think here? Macros are very useful. So macros can be defined at various levels. The first level would be inside the method. For example, let's say I can say hash define dot file path, and in the bracket I can give the file path. For example, let me take a folder. I have the documents here, and let me copy this path and let me add it here. Done. Okay, sorry. Okay, done. This is the file path. And this macro can be used only inside this particular method. Okay, this is the scope of the macro is only to this particular method. If you define this macro, the same macro, if I cut from here and if I paste it over here, then the scope of the macro is entire class. Let's say in this class I have 100 methods. In all the 100 methods, I can use this macro. Okay, how to use a macro? It's very simple. Okay, you need to use a symbol called hash, and then you need to give the macro name. That's it. Done. We can use this macro. This is a simple macro, and this is called one line macro. This is called one line macro, which will have only one line in it. And the second type of macro. The second type of macro is called local macro. Okay, the second type of macro is called local macro. I can use hash local macro dot, let's say I want to add two numbers inside a macro, add, and then you can say some, okay, let me take the variables first. I think I have not taken the variables. Int a comma b comma c. I will take three variables. I will say c equal to, instead of a plus b, I will say %1 plus %2. Okay, I am saying that this macro is expecting two arguments. Is that right? This macro is expecting how many arguments? Two arguments. And then you can say hash and macro. Hash and macro. Okay. And here the people used to ask me, oh, is it the only purpose of a macro? You can write any number of lines here. I can say info addition is %c, str fmt, and then I can say addition is %1 comma c, and then bracket close semicolon. You can write any number of statements you want, or sometimes let's say you have a field list and which you are going to use in hundreds of places. Then you can say hash local macro dot field list. Okay, and then you can say city comma country comma country comma state. I'm using only three fields. Okay, I'm using only three fields: city, country, state, and then I will say hash and macro. Done. This is also you can do. Okay, now what I can do, I can say ICI address. I can say address select hash field list and then address. Done. Let's see whether it works or not. Okay, I'm saying select hash field list and then address. Oh, 1 second, it is throwing some error. It is saying here you have missed the semicolon. Good. Let me save this now. Here it says bracket expected. Okay, let me do a small change here. Okay, let me do a small change here. And then, okay, hash macro dot add hash macro dot city country state. Why it is not taking hash field list here? Illegal table specification. Okay, let me do one thing. From, let me write. Okay, done. From address. So this is how we can write. Okay, and similarly, I want to add the two numbers. Then what I can do? I can simply write hash, and then I can say add in the bracket 23 comma 33. I can pass two numbers, and the macro will add two numbers. Can you say this? These are the benefits of using a macro here. And let's say this is the benefit of using the macros. I want to use these macros across the AOT. This is only at the method or the class level. I want to use it across the AOT. Then whatever I need to do is there is something called global macro or AOT macro. Can you see this? We need to take this macro. I will say ICI macro here. Click on the add button, and then I will say hash define dot py in the bracket. You can say 3.14. Save. Okay. Now in this macros dot xpp, okay, I can, what I can do is I can declare that I can say hash. What is the name of the macro? ICI macro, and we will call that ICI macro as a global macro. If you want to access the global macro, you need to use macro library dot ICI macro. 1 second, it's loading. Okay, you need to say that I'm going to use this macro in my code, and then you can say info, and then I will use strfmt, and then %1 comma hash pi. Let's see whether it works or not. Save. Okay. Now let me run through this code, and then we will see how it is working. Okay. Let me just simply set this as the startup object, and then run. We will see now how it works. This will be interesting. Okay, now you can see here, if I press F10, okay, it's still loading. Let's wait for a minute. Now I think everything is loaded. Let's see. Now you can see select hash field list. It has selected the fields, whatever the data we need. This is how you can work with the field list. Okay, and then let me press F11 to check whether it is going into this macro or not. Oh, it's waiting. Don't know why. Let's wait for a minute here. It's still loading. Now we're taking some time. Let's wait for a minute. Okay. Oh, good. It went into exception. What did it say? Edition is 23. Okay. It went into the info message. Don't worry. This is info. And here you can see it as exception, but that is info. Okay. Edition is 23. But whereas it did not go into my macro here. Why? Why it did not go into my macro? Because you know how the macro will work. Do you know how the macro will work? Whenever the code encounters, okay, while during the runtime, when it encounters hash file path, it will come back to this file and then it will read the file path. Whenever it's macro.add, it will come back to this add and then it will replace these two details. So what is happening here? Each and every time when you're working with a macro, you have a disk operation. The more number of disk operations will slow down the system performance. Okay, if you have more number of macros in a system, then it will slow down the system performance. You need to use less number of macros. And what to do with this one then? Because in case of AX 2012 we have no other option, but in case of Dynamics 365 we have an option called const. We have a new keyword called const, and then you need to use the string, and then you can use file path equal to, and you can use this file path. Okay, and once you prefix const to any of the type, that is a constant which is not changeable. The value that you assign to a constant cannot be changed during the runtime. So what you need to do, you should never use the macros in Dynamics 365. Okay, it's there, they are there for a purpose. Okay, if you have a requirement where you want to use the same thing in some 50 or 100 places, then you need to create a global macro. Okay, here I have used pi. What is the pi? The value of pi is 3.14 in any of the class. In that case, you can use a macro. Whereas coming to this file path, this is unique only for this particular class. What is the purpose of using a macro here? If your requirement is to a class, then go with the constants. If your requirement is entire AOT, then go with a global macro. Either go with a global macro and a constant, but don't use local macros and inline macros. Okay, the hash defined, we will call them as inline macros. Inline macros and local macros are dangerous. What they will do? They will simply reduce the performance, because each and every time it should read from the macro, it should read from the file. You are increasing the disk IO like anything. Okay, please remember this. Okay, please remember this, because in one of the case we found this performance issue. Okay, I will tell you what happened. They are trying to have some loop of 1 lakh times, and then they are using this hash define. Okay, and then they wrote some piece of code. In some places I found that they are using this hash macro as well. Instead of writing a local function, they wrote hash macro and then they used it .add. So what happened is ultimately it will decrease the performance like anything, because you are using a discover. Yeah, discover increases, the performance will get decreased. Okay, so please remember, if you want to degrade the performance, go and use macros in your classes. Otherwise, only use constants. What is the benefit of constant? When you are compiling, when you are running this piece of code, when you are instantiating this class, what will happen? The constant will get memory. This will also get memory. But whereas the one you write with hash define will never get the memory, which is why macros are slow, and if you use const, it will be faster. Please remember. Okay? Yeah, this is about the macros and then the exception handling. Now, from tomorrow, we are going to start with the object orientation in X++. Okay, if I say object orientation in X++, yeah, object orientation works in X++ as well. There are few features which might or which will not work, but the other features will work in X++. Okay, yeah, actually I don't want to start that now because I'm thinking. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's see the introduction of the object orientation, and then we'll close the session. Okay, let me open the OneNote now. There are few concepts. There are few concepts which are very important in case of object orientation. So before knowing what is object orientation, we need to know what is the object. What is the object? This is the first question that we need to get, because this is the parent of all the classes. What is the object? Object is nothing but code and data linked together. If you have a code and data linked together, after creating an instance, an object will be created. Okay, if you are linking up the code and data together into a single entity, that entity we will call it as a object. Okay, and the process of binding code and data together is called encapsulation. Okay, is called encapsulation. Okay, if you are binding the code and data together, we will call the mechanism as called encapsulation. And once that code and data are linked together, okay, after binding them, then we will say object is created, and we will call that entity as the object. Okay, and this is the first thing that we need to know about the object orientation. So in object orientation, we have different concepts. Okay, from that, the first one is encapsulation, second one is polymorphism, and then we have the inheritance. What is that? Inheritance. Okay, what is polymorphism? Polymorphism is the attribute that allows a single interface to control the generic class of actions. Okay, if you are creating a single interface, if you are creating a single interface to control the generic class of actions, then we will call it as polymorphism. Okay, and the polymorphism is of two types. One is compile time and runtime. We will see them. Okay, when we go to the code, we can see that. And the next one is inheritance. What is inheritance? Inheritance is the process by which one object can acquire the properties of another object. Okay, one object can acquire the properties of another object. Okay, so these are the different things that we will learn in the object orientation. Okay, in the object orientation. Okay, yeah, that's it for today. Yeah. We will see through code all those things. Now it's your time. Please let me know if you have any queries in today's session. If there are no queries, I will end the session for everyone.
Hi Kumar,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have one very small query. Actually, in this Solution Explorer, you have base enum classes, all are in a segregated way.
Hmm.
But actually, in my machine, they all are coming together. Means like classes,
Okay,
all are
got it.
coming.
So the
It is
first time you have created a project, na, you need to do one thing. You need to go to options. You need to select organize projects by element type. Okay.
ah,
The created ones cannot be organized, but the ones
okay,
you are going to create in future, they will get organized. Okay.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks all for the session. Let's meet again tomorrow same time. Thank you all. Bye.